2, 3.
Everybody. We're glad that you joined in today. This is a partnership between the St. Louis Storytelling Festival, which is a University of Missouri Extension program, and the Missouri Folk Arts program. And it's been a collaboration to support and highlight the great work of the Missouri Folk Arts program, Traditional Arts Apprenticeship program, better known as TAP. So every year at our festival, which happens typically around the first week of May, we have some time and we have some space to acknowledge some of the great apprentices who have also served as master artists, and particularly when it comes to storytelling. And we've been doing that for the past several years. And this year we decided to focus on an artist who incorporates storytelling. You know, there's a lot of overlap between music and storytelling. And so this event is kind of an homage to that. And so on behalf of the St. Louis Storytelling Festival, on behalf of University Missouri Extension, I'm thrilled to be able to co-host this and to present this to you today. So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to Lisa Higgins from the Missouri Folk Arts program.
Thank you, Lisa Overholser and the St. Louis Storytelling Festival. So for those who haven't been with us in the past few years, this is a program that we started. It's called Then and Now Apprenticeship Journeys. And we started this after the 30th anniversary of the Traditional Arts Apprenticeship program in 2015. And that year, we spent a lot of time producing several events, and we really focused a lot on the master artists who have been in the program. We were able to include 2 artists who were in the very first year, which was 1985. And in those events, and come all the way up and kind of cover every decade of that the program had been active. We realized we weren't necessarily capturing the apprentice story, and so we came up with the idea of Then and Now, especially after we were sort of counting things during the 30th anniversary and realized we had several artists who had apprenticed at one point and then later became master artists. We partnered with St. Louis Storytelling Festival because we had 3 artists in that category who happened to be storytellers. And then even last year, we featured Helen Gannon with St. Louis Irish Arts, who, just as Lisa Overholser was saying, what a neat combination that is, because, well, Helen has the best stories, period, but there is such a great overlap in terms of music and the traditional arts and stories. So this year, our goal was to feature another artist who'd been in the program, and we're working, happy to introduce Geoff Seitz. Geoff is one of those unusual cases in that he was an apprentice and in one art form, and then later came back into the apprenticeship program as a master artist in another art form, but they're related. And so he's going to tell us about that today. Interestingly, I mentioned that we had, in that 30th year, we had 2 master artists who were still, they're the 2 surviving master artists from that year. Geoff happens to have been one of the apprentices in that first year, and he apprenticed with jazz violinist Claude, nicknamed Fiddler Williams, who was a master artist in the Kansas City jazz tradition. And so that was in 1985, the first year. And then Geoff came back to us after doing a whole lot of other things with music, and he'll tell you some of that. Came back to us in 1994, and he led an apprenticeship with Greg Crone. And that worked out, I think, pretty well for Greg as well. He seems to have taken with him, and so he's kept at it. So I want to introduce everyone to Geoff Seitz, who's there in St. Louis today at Seitz Violin.
There you go.
There you go.
Thanks for having me on this. I'm really honored to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, I just love the option with this project, because I think we're able to pay some homage, you know, to those artists that came before you. And especially we've had the opportunity to do that with some artists that have passed on, and that's the case now. So the first question that and I will tell people with the Apprentice Journeys, we ask the same 6 questions of all of the people that we interview, and I'm going to ask those of Geoff. And the very first one is, what motivated you to learn to be a musician and a luthier? So we'll kind of hit on a fiddler, I guess, even, and a luthier.
Mm-hmm. Well, I actually have been playing music my whole life. I started out at about 8 years old playing drums. That was my first instrument, drums and guitar. My dad played a little bit of mandolin and fiddle around the house, just a little. So we had those instruments laying around. And my dad was a machinist as well. So I grew up in a household where people used their hands a lot and built things and fixed things. And so, you know, when I started to get interested in the fiddle, which was in my late teens, early 20s, I, you know, had already played all different types of music since then. But I got interested in that. And then I kind of, after a little while, got interested in making and repairing them too, because of this background of working with my hands, you know, around the house and all that stuff. And I had jobs that all through high school and all through, you know, college and stuff, where I fixed things and did, you know, I worked at an auto body shop, and I worked at a trash company that did commercial trash pickup and worked on trucks and things around the shop and all that, you know. So I've had that experience. So I just kind of melded the two together eventually, and tried to make it all kind of work out for me. And so far I've been just doing it for a long time now. So
just as a follow-up question, for a long time with your shop, how long have you been open there?
So at this location here, which is in South St. Louis, like on in Holly Hills area on Loughborough Avenue, we've been here for 37 years.
Wow.
So something like that, since 1987. So I think that's the right math. I'm not sure.
Sounds like
the 30. I don't know. Yeah.
I'll check it. My dad was the one who did math in his head, not me. So.
Yeah. Let's see. 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a couple of years after the apprenticeship with Mr. Williams, then, right?
That's right. Yes. Although I had already learned how to make violins, and I was working out of my house and just doing, you know, doing some stuff, or doing contract work for like wholesale companies that dealt in musical instruments, like St. Louis Music Supply and things like that. But right, I had the flexibility to because we used to meet in Columbia, Missouri, to take lessons. So Claude would come over from Kansas City, and I would go down to Columbia, and then there were a couple of other people that also played with us, Mike Henderson and Mary D. Brown. And so we would meet at Mike Henderson's house, and that's where we had the lessons, was at his house. And it was fantastic. It was just great. And John Stewart, guitar player, he used to be our backup. And it was really something.
That's cool. So I was wondering how, since you're in St. Louis and he was obviously in Kansas City with that traditional style of jazz, how that exactly worked. So you would both travel and meet up regularly. And I knew that there were a couple of other apprentices as well.
Yeah.
So did you do that like on a monthly or a weekly basis? Do you remember?
Yeah, it would be like, I think it would either be once a month or twice a month. I can't remember exactly, but it seemed often. It may have been once a week. I can't remember exactly, but it was pretty, you know, And yeah.
You want to tell us just a little bit more about him? Since you knew him, I was able to meet him a couple of times when I came back to work at the Missouri Folk Arts Program. That's been about almost 21 years now. So I met him a couple times in Kansas City when he was performing for some events that we hosted. But you got obviously seen each other that often, and maybe continued into the future to have a relationship with him.
Yeah, I did. And it was really fantastic. He was an amazing person. He went through, he started out, believe it or not, he started out as kind of a country fiddler. He had a group with his brother when he was a kid, and they would play kind of like country stuff and things like that. But he decided to study the instrument more serious. Also played really fantastic guitar. He was Count Basie's first guitar player. So he was really great. And so that was one of his secret weapons, is the fact that he knew the jazz music. He knew how it was structured from not only a melodic point of view, but also from a harmonic point of view, from the guitar backup or by the chordal structure. Mm-hmm. So he had the whole thing covered in his mind, which was like really amazing. And it was like, that was a revelation right there in and of itself, is that he's, he told me basically, I'm paraphrasing, but he told me that I just know where this music goes. I know how it goes and where it goes. and that was really something, because that's a high level of playing when you're like that.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. Yeah. What do you think was the most important thing that you learned from him in those lessons?
I think that knowing the music and knowing where it went, but also just trying to make it beautiful, make the music beautiful, make it really interesting. I learned temperament. His temperament was always real level. He always had a real level sense of everything. So there was a lot of wonderful things hanging around a guy like that. He was really experienced, had a lot of depth, and that's always inspiring when you hang around people like that, because that is something that just you can't get that without the experience. It's really it's a real honor to actually know someone like that and get to hang out with them and learn things off of them.
Yeah. I'm gonna throw this story in here since we're with the Storytelling Festival, and it's sort of timely. I just saw our colleague Willie Smythe is a folklorist who's fairly recently retired from Washington State as the state folklorist. Many years ago, he worked in Oklahoma, and that's where Fiddler Williams was born and raised, and I think that's where that country influence comes from with his brother. But Willie shared, there's, everything, you can find it on the web now. He shared the program from, I think, one of the first Juneteenth festivals in Greenwood, Oklahoma, that he, of course, worked with all of these African-American artists, including Fiddler Williams. There's a little bio in there. It was a great resource to be able to see in the last couple of weeks at how timely that is. We're going to, I'm going to be talking about him next week with Geoff, and anyway, so I want to let you know about that. I'll find it and send you a link to it, because I know you'll want to see it.
Yeah, I would love to see that.
Cool.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, right. All right. So maybe the travel, but the question is, what's the most challenging aspect of that apprenticeship with him?
Yeah, well, coming to terms with the fact that he knew so much about the music and all that stuff, and all we could do is we recorded them, and all we could do is try to hang on for dear life. And part of the lessons were he would actually show us, let's say a lick, a certain way to do something, and it sounded easy because he was so good, and it was just nothing for him to do it, and it was difficult. It was often difficult, and that was kind of the hardest part, was the fact that it was just so, sometimes it was just so easy for him and so difficult for us, and but you know, he put everything in perspective more or less. You know, I mean, he had a whole different kind of thing about the music than we did. You know,
Yeah.
His experience and just growing up with all of these great players, he had a lot of stories about like Charlie Bird and you know, Charlie Bird Parker, and they called him. In fact, they called him Bird. A lot of people don't know this, but he says the reason why we all called him Bird is because we would have rehearsals, and Charlie Parker would always bring a bag of chicken wings with him or a bag of fried chicken, and he would sit there and eat his chicken before they would play. And it was said he'd do that every time. So we just started calling him Bird. You know, people thought it might have been because of the way he played, but it was actually because because he would snack on chicken before the rehearsal. You know, so that was kind of, you know, so think about that. I mean, here's a guy that's, you know, hanging out and playing with the greatest people on earth. You know, he played with Count Basie, he played with Jay McShann, he played with all these fantastic. He was one of those people, you know, so that it was almost overwhelming, to be honest with you, in some ways, when you're around someone like that, you know.
Yeah. What an incredible opportunity. I mean, I love the apprenticeship program, but what an incredible opportunity for you to be able to meet him and spend all that time with him.
It was really, really great. It was really something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was special. It was really lovely. I'm so thankful for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So before there is another question related to being in the apprenticeship with him, and that is, what did you learn about teaching from him?
Yeah, so, you know, the one thing was his steady manner and his patience. You know, that was one of the things, and also his striving for excellence. He was one of these people that just, you know, don't halfway it, you know, just try to really make it great. And he was always making it great. And that was really a good lesson, you know.
Yeah. Great.
Don't phone it in.
All right. So then, what was that, 9 years later, you came back into the apprenticeship program as a master artist in luthier, which you said you were already practicing. Yeah. And I know you went off out west for school and
well, I apprenticed with a guy in Spokane, Washington in 1977, and named Glenn T. Stockton. So I did a one-on-one apprenticeship program, that type of stuff was starting to fade out. These violin making schools were popping up, and that's where people were going to learn the violin making and luthiery. But I learned one-on-one with a guy, which is starting to, that was starting to fade out. So, and then I've been making and repairing things since then. Mm-hmm. Up until then, we got on that apprenticeship program. I knew Greg Crone, and that he, you know, was wanting to build, and he was building some things, and so that's when we applied. Right.
So you already had a relationship with him.
I did. We would run into each other at music things. Mm-hmm. a lot. Mm-hmm. He was really interested in Irish music at the time, and you know, I've never really played it, but I love listening to it, so I go see it. And I would see him at these Irish music events, and other folk things, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's see. So tell us. So you all already knew each other. I would say, who was like 94? That must have been Dana Everett Spain, maybe. Was that who was?
Yeah.
In the program.
I think so. Yeah, that was. Yeah.
When you all applied, put in an application, and for those who don't know, it's an application process, and they're reviewed by panelists, and they score them, and that's back actually when I was a graduate student intern at the folk arts program. I remember witnessing a few of those panel meetings. Mm-hmm. A lot of people around a table having pretty heavy discussions about, you know, the merits and the various apprenticeships and stuff. So you all submitted your application and you got in, and tell us about the apprenticeship. What did that look like?
Yeah, so we I I believe by then I had my shop set up already. And so we would make these days, and that was for sure once a week, or maybe even more.
Mm-hmm.
And we would like go through the various steps and how I kind of learned how to do it. See, Greg had a little bit of experience. He went to one of those violin making schools for a couple of years, although their program's like 4 years, so he didn't go through the whole thing. And so then he was already kind of not unfamiliar with stuff, but he didn't quite, you know, he didn't do it the way I did it, because I did it different than those schools did. I did it the way I learned from that one guy. So we would go over that, you know, that style. And when you're a maker, one thing to know is that it takes so long to make these things, and it's just, if you do it all by hand like we do, that over the years you do evolve your style a little bit too, of how you make them, and you get different tools show up, so then those change the way you do stuff, and you know, things like that.
So did you all, in your meeting, did you do like repair, but also did he make an instrument from start to finish over the course of the apprenticeship?
Yeah. So he did make we both made an instrument start to finish. Plus we were repairing stuff a little bit on the side too. You know, there was some repair work, but it was mostly focused on building.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And then, let's see. So then the next question is part 2 of that question is, what do you think is the most important thing you taught Greg?
So I think 2 things. I think maybe how I learned it is that you need to make it kind of an artistic thing, because in the violin world, the violin is a functional item. So there's a making them for like common use or commercial use. There's like a commercially, you know, and then there's the artist type, where they're unique or they're special to that maker, which is actually the real traditional way violins were made. Violins have been around for 300 plus years, and all of the best violins were made by individuals that had a small shop, maybe at the most a few people working for them, or nobody, them working by themselves or working with a couple members of their family. And they made stuff how they made them, you know, and it's all by hand. There was no technology to speak of, and they made some of the greatest things ever. So if you get closer to that situation, you'll end up with a better end result, you know, in terms of artistic thing. So I always kind of stress the artistic end of it, and just the attention to detail, just to try to just make it really detailed and really excellent. That was another thing that I stressed a lot about. That
attention to detail and precision, even in the artistry, is something that we did. Lisa, we had a traveling exhibit of instruments by 6 luthiers in Missouri a few years ago, and both Geoff and Greg were included. And in the narrative, Deb Bailey, our folk art specialist, was drafting the narratives and sort of looking back and interviewing people, and they also did some photo shoots with everyone. She and Rita Reed, the photographer. And the thing that really came across for you, Geoff and Greg, was that notion of balance and precision.
Yeah.
And I think it even conveyed in the photos that Rita took of you all.
Yeah. It was something we focused on a lot.
Yeah. All right. We're good.
And Greg has a shop now, and he's still doing it. So, and he's making some really great stuff. And despite that he learned from me, he's making really, no, he's really evolved in this really good maker. So.
Right. Well, yeah. Thanks for volunteering that. I was going to ask. I knew that he was affiliated with you in making, but he's in Washington or Missouri.
Yeah, New Haven, outside of Washington. And we were kind of, we were kind of using our shops together there for a while, but he's pretty much out on his own now. And so he's repairing and doing things, but he's also making great stuff. Really good.
Cool. So, let's see. Well, actually, we're at the last question.
Okay.
So, and that is, I mean, you've in addition to the apprenticeship with Mr. Williams and teaching Greg Crone, you also talked about your apprenticeship in luthier. But the question is, you know, if you think about the relationship between a master artist and apprentice, the question is, what does it mean to you? And maybe even to think about like what it meant to you back then and what it means to you now.
Yeah, well, the main I mean, the number one thing that comes to mind is that this would have never happened without the apprenticeship program. So none of this, I mean, I could have maybe run into Claude playing somewhere, but to sit down with them in a situation and learn is really special. I mean, that's amazing. And same with the thing with Greg, where we would have to take the time to focus on building and stuff. So the apprenticeship program provided real true opportunity to create a situation that would be a little more difficult to create in the regular world. It would be more complicated. This kind of, you know, focused it. Everything got focused in on. So it was, that made it really amazing. That was, and special. Mm-hmm. I will never, ever forget it. And it really means a lot to what I do now and my playing even and everything like that. Cause I mostly play myself for my music. Let's talk about Claude. I mostly play old time fiddle music and square dance kind of stuff and folk songs and stuff. But I do play some, you know, jazz, and I play in a band that plays New Orleans kind of stuff. And, you know, I play all kinds of different things, and I'm always tapping into the stuff I learned from Claude, you know. So, and even if you play old timey music and old fiddle music, Claude still had a way to do that. And, you know, I mean, he's still an influence somehow for me with that. So, you know,
right.
And so that's how I feel about it. It's just amazing, just incredible. And I feel very lucky that I got to do that.
Well, I wasn't even around, and I feel really lucky that we've had you involved in the program since the beginning.
Yeah.
Kind of, like I said, it's sort of an amazing thing to be able to talk to somebody. We've talked to Doris Frazier, who's there in St. Louis, who's the gospel singer and pianist, and she's still kicking and teaching a little bit. And then HK, Sylvie.
Yes.
Those are the two surviving master artists from that first year. I think there were 10 apprenticeships that year. So that's a cool thing to be able to talk to somebody who was an apprentice at that time.
Yeah.
We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much.
Now that I ask all my questions, is there anything you want to add above and beyond? Or I did say that if you wanted to play a few licks, then that would be cool too, but it's really up to you what you want to do with the last however many minutes you want.
I'll play some. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, let me get my thing. So I can play this little bit of thing that Claude taught me. It's just basically like a blues in C, and it just incorporates a few of the licks that he showed me, and then, you know, just kind of, you know, might make something else up. I don't know, but you know, so let's see if I'm into. Okay. 2, 3.
right? The, you know, ASL, like clapping. Yay, that was fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
And I can hear the country influence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for illustrating that so beautifully.
Sure.
Very cool. All right. Lisa, you want to ask anything? Or I'm so glad all three of us could get together today and make this happen. You know, I'm really very, as an intern, and when I came back, you know, to work with the folk arts program, I'm like, this is the hub of the wheel of the Missouri Folk Arts Program, the Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Program. I've gotten to know so many cool people over the years, and you're one of them, and just such an incredible legacy that you're able to talk about today, both that you've got from Mr. Williams and passed on in your own way, in ways to Greg. So I really appreciate you being with us.
And I should mention that this is a violin that I made. So just so that you know, I'm playing on something that I made.
Perfect.
Very cool to have that link to so long ago. It's very, very cool. Doesn't happen very often. You know, one question, it's not really a question, but do you have a favorite memory of the apprentice experience, the apprentice or being a master artist, whether it's making, you know, the violins? Do you have a favorite memory or a favorite story?
Well, I mean, with Claude, one of my favorite stories were the fact that he would like go to bed later than we would, and he would be up earlier than us, and he would drink his coffee. He would put like about 4 or 5 tablespoons full of sugar in his coffee. It was just incredible, and yeah, he lived to be about 100 years old or so. He lived a long time, so that was always kind of fun to, if you were hanging out and staying overnight, you'd get to, you know, hang out with him even more. You get to just see his regular stuff. So that was really great. And then the violin apprenticeship, it's always really wonderful to make something that works, that's functional, that's beautiful, you know, that's pretty. And, you know, it's that when you're doing that and you get something finished, it's really a very rewarding as well. So. Yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah, and it's really neat to see, you know, Greg and what a great maker he is now. So.
You said he was in New Haven?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I'll offer one more quick story, then I'll let everybody go. But I think it was actually our 25th anniversary of the apprenticeship program. We had a showcase of some of the master artists at International Institute's Festival of Nations in August of that year. And Geoff, you were one of the folks who came over, and we had some tables set out for makers, and you had some examples of your work. We did the narrative stage, and I was standing at the back of the tent looking towards the stage, and you were on with Karam Khani is his last name. He's a Kurdish musician and instrument maker. Fardeen Karam Khani.
Yeah, Fardeen. Yeah.
Yeah. And you and he were both on stage because you're both instrument makers. And because he had done an apprenticeship to teach and they made the stringed instrument as well, but he also made drums. And Lisa, I don't know, they just started playing music together.
Oh, that's very cool.
It was so cool. So Geoff, you know, played some licks, and Fardeen accompanied him, and then Fardeen, you know, played some, and Geoff picked up the drum and started like backing it with the beat. It was so cool. I've never forgotten that. It was just a great experience.
Yeah.
It really only happens in those kinds of situations, or maybe, you know, hanging out at a party or something, but it was good.
Yeah, I'm still friends with Fardeen. I see him every so often. He drops into the shop and says hi, and he's an incredible guy.
Yeah, he's an incredible story, but we'll save that one for another day. But yeah, he's an amazing guy. Amazing.
Yeah. That's very cool. That's the process of culture right there.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.